It was 2 in the morning when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. My sister never called that late, and when I saw her name flash across the screen, I felt a jolt of worry. I picked up right away, half asleep, but the sound of her voice froze me completely. She whispered, "Rachel, don't come home. Someone's in your apartment." Then the line went dead. I sat up in bed, wide awake, trying to understand what I had just heard. My heart started racing, and I called her back right away, but she didn't answer. I called again. Still nothing. I stared at my dark apartment, the city lights flickering through the window, and suddenly everything felt wrong. 10 minutes later, I heard it. The door to my apartment creaked open. Before we go any further, make sure to subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because what happened that night still feels impossible to believe. My name is Rachel Monroe. I live alone in a small apartment in Seattle, working as a graphic designer for an advertising firm. I live a simple, quiet life. Long hours at work, coffee for dinner, and the same routine every night. My sister, Hannah, is the only person who checks on me daily. She's older by 4 years and works as a nurse in Spokane, 2 hours away. She's always been protective, especially since our mom passed away last year. Every night, before bed, Hannah and I would talk, just to make sure we were both okay. She always ended our calls with the same line, "Text me when you get home." It was her way of making sure I was safe. That's the kind of person she is. Calm, grounded, but always ready to step in if something went wrong. That night, I had stayed late at the office finishing a campaign for a new client. Everyone else had gone home hours earlier, and I was the only one left, surrounded by the low hum of computers and the smell of burnt coffee. I was tired but focused, planning to leave in about 15 minutes. My phone buzzed, and when I saw Hannah's name, I smiled. I thought she was just checking in, but when I answered, everything changed. Her voice was low, shaky, almost like she was hiding. She said, "Rachel, listen to me carefully. Don't come home." I remember frowning, thinking it was some kind of joke. "What are you talking about?" I asked. Then she whispered, "There's someone inside your apartment." The words hit me like ice water. I asked her how she knew that, but before she could answer, the call cut off. My phone screen went black. I sat there for a few seconds, staring at it, hoping she would call back. When she didn't, I felt my chest tighten. My first thought was that maybe she had made a mistake. Maybe she was just tired from her shift. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Hannah wasn't the type to panic. If she said someone was there, she had a reason. I tried calling her again, over and over, but it went straight to voicemail. I grabbed my keys and ran out of the building, my mind spinning with questions. How could she possibly know someone was in my apartment? She lived 2 hours away. Did she talk to one of my neighbors? Did she see something online? None of it made sense. The drive home felt endless. The streets were almost empty, the rain falling in thin silver lines across the windshield. I turned off the radio because even music felt too loud. I just needed silence to think. I replayed every word of her call again and again. Her voice had been so full of fear, not panic, but something worse, something that sounded like guilt. By the time I reached my street, my hands were trembling. All the lights in my building were off. The hallway windows were dark. I parked outside, staring up at the second floor where my apartment was. Everything looked still. For a second, I almost convinced myself she had been mistaken. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe she'd explain in the morning, and we'd laugh about how paranoid she sounded. But when I stepped out of my car, I saw it. My living room light flickered for a brief second through the curtains, then went dark again. My heart dropped. Someone was inside. I stayed perfectly still, trying to decide what to do. I didn't want to go in. I didn't even want to breathe. I could feel the weight of the night pressing down on me. Then my phone buzzed again. It was from Hannah. All it said was, "Whatever happens, don't open the door." That was the moment I realized my sister wasn't warning me about a stranger. She was warning me about something or someone she already knew. The street outside my apartment was completely still. The only sound was the soft drizzle of rain against the pavement and the dull buzz of a broken streetlight flickering near the corner. My hands were trembling so badly that I had to hold my phone with both of them. I read my sister's text again. Whatever happens, don't open the door. My heart hammered in my chest as a single thought ran through my head. How could she possibly know what was happening here from 2 hours away? I backed toward my car, keeping my eyes on the dark windows of my apartment. The curtains were still now, no sign of movement, but the air felt wrong, too quiet, too heavy. I tried calling Hannah again, straight to voicemail. I left her a message, my voice shaking. Hannah, please tell me what's going on. I'm outside. I'm not going in, I promise. Just call me back. I hung up and tried to steady my breathing. That's when I noticed the neighbor from across the hall, Mr. Patel, coming out to take out his trash. He was an older man who'd lived in the building for years. I waved him over, whispering harshly, Mr. Patel, did you see anyone around my apartment tonight? He squinted at me, confused. I thought I heard footsteps upstairs earlier, he said slowly. Maybe half an hour ago. Your door was cracked open when I went to check my mail. My stomach turned. Cracked. Open? He nodded. But then I heard it close. Thought maybe you got home early. I shook my head. That wasn't me. A flicker of worry passed through his face. You want me to call someone? I nodded quickly. Yes. The police. Please. As he hurried back inside to call, I took a few steps toward the stairwell, my shoes crunching softly on the wet ground. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs and stared up at the second-floor landing. My apartment door was visible from where I stood, shut tight, no light beneath it. I kept listening, holding my breath. For a moment, there was nothing. Then I heard it, a soft thud, like something being dropped onto the floor inside. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. My legs felt locked in place. I whispered to myself, she said don't open the door, as if repeating it could protect me. I pulled out my phone and called 911. The dispatcher's voice was calm. What's your emergency? There's someone inside my apartment, I said quickly. My sister warned me not to go in. I don't know how she knew, but she was right. I just heard something. She asked for my address, my name, and told me to stay where I was. Officers are on their way, she said. Stay outside, stay visible if you can. I agreed, but as soon as the call ended, I heard another sound, this time from behind me. A faint click. I spun around, my heart racing, but it was only the front door of the building swinging slightly in the wind. Still, it made me realize how completely alone I was. I tried calling Hannah again, desperate to hear her voice. To my surprise, this time she answered. Her voice was low, ragged. Rachel? Hannah? Where are you? What's happening? She hesitated, her voice breaking. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. Just don't go inside. Promise me you won't. Hannah, what are you talking about? How do you even know someone's here? I can't explain right now, she said, her breath uneven. Just trust me. He's dangerous. He? Who is he? I demanded. But before she could answer, I heard a muffled sound on her end, like a struggle. And then the call cut off again. My knees nearly gave out. Something was very wrong. I started pacing, trying to think. Who was he? And why would Hannah be involved? My mind flashed to her ex-boyfriend, Mark, the one she'd broken up with months ago after things got violent. He had shown up to her work once, shouting in the parking lot until security dragged him away. What if this had something to do with him? I turned my gaze back to the building and froze. Through the crack between my curtains, a light flickered on. The kitchen light. I knew for certain I had turned it off before leaving for work. Then, as I watched, the shadow of a man moved across the window. I stumbled backward, my breath catching in my throat. Oh my God, I whispered. Within minutes, flashing red and blue lights reflected across the wet pavement. 2 police cars pulled up, and I ran toward them, pointing upstairs. He's in there, I gasped. Someone's in my apartment. The officers told me to stay behind their car as they moved in quietly, weapons drawn. I watched them climb the stairs, one hand pressed over my mouth. Every creak of the wood made my heart jump. Then I heard shouting, "Police! Stay where you are!" followed by the crash of a door swinging open. For a long minute, I couldn't breathe. Finally, One of the officers appeared at the top of the stairs and called down, "Ma'am, the apartment's empty. There's no one here now." Empty. The word didn't make sense. I had seen someone. I had heard footsteps. And if the person was gone, where did they go? I climbed the stairs with shaking legs as the officers searched the rooms. My door frame was splintered near the lock, like someone had forced their way in. A kitchen drawer was open. A few utensils scattered across the counter. My phone charger lay snapped in half on the floor. One of the officers picked up something near the doorway, a muddy footprint. He crouched down and examined it. "Whoever it was came in recently," he said, "and they left in a hurry." I looked around the apartment that had always felt like my safe space. It didn't feel safe anymore. Everything looked normal but wrong, like a copy of my home after something had been taken from it. I turned toward the window where I'd seen the shadow. The glass was wet with rain, and on the inside, there was a single streak, like someone's hand had pressed against it. I stood there, staring at that print, and felt cold all over. That was when one of the officers turned to me and asked, "Miss Monroe, do you have any idea who might have wanted to break in here?" I hesitated, still shaking, then whispered, "I think my sister does." The police stayed for almost an hour, checking every corner of my apartment, taking photos, and dusting for prints. They assured me it was safe to go inside, but I couldn't make myself cross the threshold. The air still felt thick, heavy with something unseen. I watched them from the hallway, my arms wrapped around myself, trying to stop the shaking that wouldn't quit. When they finally left, the lead officer, a kind man named Reed, gave me his card. "If you remember anything, or if your sister contacts you again, call me right away," he said. I nodded, but my mind was already somewhere else, on Hannah and the terrified sound of her voice. The moment they drove off, I called her again. It went straight to voicemail. I texted her, begged her to tell me she was okay, but there was no reply. I didn't know what to do, so I sat down on the front steps of the building and waited, hoping she'd call back. The rain had stopped, leaving the air cold and damp. The world felt still, like it was holding its breath. Then a flash of light caught my eye. Across the street, under a flickering street lamp, I saw a car I recognized instantly. A dark blue sedan. Hannah's car. My heart dropped. I got up and hurried toward it. When I reached the driver's side, the window was fogged from the inside. I peered through the glass, expecting to see her sitting there, maybe hiding or crying. But the car was empty. The driver's seat was pushed back, and on the passenger seat lay her blue cardigan, the one she'd worn the last time we saw each other. I opened the door, calling her name softly, as if she might appear from the shadows. The cardigan smelled faintly of her perfume, that familiar mix of vanilla and jasmine. I pressed it to my face, fighting the sting of tears. Then I noticed something else on the seat, a folded piece of paper tucked under the cardigan. My hands shook as I opened it. In Hannah's handwriting were the words, "I'm sorry, Rachel." I couldn't stop him. My stomach clenched. The words swam in front of my eyes. Stop who? What had she been trying to stop? I looked around frantically, scanning the dark street. A cold breeze swept through, rustling the trees. And for the first time that night, I felt truly afraid, not of being attacked, but of what I might discover next. I dialed Officer Reed's number right away. "You need to come back," I said quickly. "I found my sister's car outside my building, and there's a note. I think she's in trouble." He told me to stay where I was, and that he'd send a unit immediately. I stayed by the car, pacing in small circles, unable to keep still. My mind was a storm of questions. Had Hannah come here to warn me in person? Was she taken? And what did she mean by, "I couldn't stop him"? Before I could think any further, I heard something, faint footsteps from behind me. I spun around, but the street was empty. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ear. I forced myself to breathe slowly, to stay calm. Then I noticed the door to my building swinging slightly open again. The police had closed it when they left. A part of me wanted to wait outside until help arrived, but another part, the same stubborn part that had always made me face things head-on, told me I couldn't just stand there. I needed to know what was happening. I needed to know if Hannah was inside. I crept toward the entrance, phone in hand, flashlight on. The hallway lights flickered weakly. I whispered her name. "Hannah?" No answer. I climbed the stairs, every creak of the steps echoing through the silence. My apartment door was still open from earlier. The lock was broken, hanging loosely from the frame. I pushed it wider with the tip of my shoe and stepped inside. The room smelled faintly of rain and something metallic, like wet iron. The curtains moved slightly in the breeze from the open window. I glanced toward the kitchen and froze. The refrigerator door was wide open, and taped to it was another note, in the same handwriting, Hannah's handwriting. It read, "He knows you're awake." My entire body went cold. I backed toward the door, gripping my phone so hard it hurt. I tried to call Officer Reed again, but my hands were shaking too much. The call wouldn't go through. I stumbled into the hallway, gasping for air. That's when I heard it, a faint creak from the end of the hall, near the stairwell. Someone was there. I turned slowly, my flashlight trembling, and caught a glimpse of movement, a shadow slipping out of sight. I bolted down the stairs, nearly tripping as I reached the bottom. I ran straight to the street, to where the police cars had been minutes earlier, now gone. Then, mercifully, headlights appeared at the corner. Officer Reed's cruiser pulled up fast, lights flashing. He jumped out, and I ran to him, waving the note in my hand. "He's still inside," I cried. "Someone's in there." The officers stormed the building again, while I stood outside clutching my sister's cardigan. This time, when they searched, they found something new, muddy footprints leading from my apartment window down the back fire escape. Whoever had been inside had left only minutes before they arrived, but that wasn't all. One of the officers found something near the back door, a cell phone, old, scratched, and familiar. It was Hannah's. I knew then that my sister hadn't just called to warn me. She had been here. She had faced whoever was in my apartment before I got home, and now she was missing. The moment they told me they had found my sister's phone, my heart sank. I ran toward the officer who was holding it, the same worn blue case I'd seen Hannah use for years. The corner cracked from when she dropped it at Christmas. Seeing it in someone else's hands made it real. She had been here. The officer placed it gently into an evidence bag, his face serious. "We'll send it for prints and data recovery," he said, but his voice sounded far away. All I could think was that my sister had been close enough to touch, and now she was gone. I sat on the back of the ambulance while they questioned me, but I could barely answer. My mind was spinning between fear, confusion, and guilt. Hannah had tried to warn me. She had come here to protect me, and somehow she'd disappeared instead. The police promised to search the area, but I knew waiting wasn't an option. I needed to understand what had happened. The next morning, I went to the police station to check on the investigation. Officer Reed met me in the lobby. He looked exhausted, the lines around his eyes deeper than the night before. "We pulled the data from your sister's phone," he said. "There were several missed calls to you around 1:50 a.m., right before the one that went through. And there's something else. She sent a voice note at 1:57 that didn't deliver until after the phone was found." He handed me his tablet, and I listened. Hannah's voice filled the room, shaking but determined. "Rachel, if you get this, don't come home. Mark is back. He knows where you live. I'm going to stop him before he gets to you." Then the recording ended with the sound of a car door slamming and tires screeching. The name hit me like a slap. Mark, her ex-boyfriend, the same man who had made her life miserable after she broke up with him months ago. I remembered the stories she told me, how he'd show up at her workplace, how she once caught him sitting in his car outside her house in the middle of the night. She said he was gone now, that he'd moved out of state, but clearly he hadn't. Officer Reed must have seen the look on my face. "We're already trying to locate him. He's been off the grid for weeks. No job, no current address. But he's the primary suspect now." I swallowed hard. "You think he took her?" He hesitated. "It's possible. Or she might have gone after him first." That thought made my blood run cold. Hannah had always been brave, sometimes too brave. If she thought I was in danger, she would have done anything to stop it, even confront him alone. Later that day, I went back to my apartment to pick up some clothes. The police had released it, though it still felt haunted. I walked in slowly, half expecting to hear footsteps again. The place smelled like cleaning chemicals and damp air. I stopped by the kitchen and noticed something the officers hadn't taken. My sister's necklace lying near the window, a thin gold chain with a small silver heart. She must have dropped it during the struggle. I picked it up carefully, holding it like a piece of her. Then I saw something else. On the inside of the window frame, faint but visible in the dust, were letters drawn by a finger, R+H. I remembered us carving those same initials on trees when we were little, pretending to make a secret sister code. My throat tightened. She'd been right there. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying her voice message over and over, searching for any clue in the background noise. Around the 15-second mark, I heard something faint, a man's voice shouting, muffled but angry. I brought it to Officer Reed the next morning, and when the tech team enhanced the audio, they made out one chilling sentence. "She's not supposed to be here." The words sent a shiver through me. Not supposed to be here. That meant Mark hadn't expected Hannah to show up. He'd been waiting for me. A few days later, the police got a lead. A witness at a gas station outside the city remembered seeing a man matching Mark's description, arguing with a woman who looked like Hannah. They left together in a gray pickup truck, heading toward the woods near Pine Valley, a rural area with old cabins and abandoned logging roads. The police organized a search, and I insisted on going with them. Officer Reed tried to stop me at first, but when he saw I wouldn't take no for an answer, he finally nodded. "Stay behind me at all times," he said. The drive to Pine Valley was tense and silent. The rain had turned the dirt roads into thick mud, and every turn of the tires made my stomach twist tighter. When we reached the clearing, I recognized Hannah's car parked at the edge of the woods, its headlights dim and battery dead. My chest ached at the sight of it. We split up. 2 officers went east while Reed and I followed a faint path down toward the creek. After about 10 minutes, Reed pointed toward a small cabin, half hidden by trees. The front door was open, hanging crooked on one hinge. We moved closer, flashlights sweeping across the wet floorboards. Inside, the place was dark and cold, with the smell of smoke and old wood. On the floor near the fireplace lay a blanket, and next to it, a phone charger, identical to mine. Reed motioned for me to stay back as he checked the other rooms. Then I heard him shout, "We've got someone!" He came out a moment later, supporting someone who could barely stand. It was Hannah. Her face was pale, her lip bruised, but her eyes were open. The moment she saw me, she reached out, whispering my name. I ran to her and held her as tightly as I could, tears spilling down my face. She kept saying, "I tried to stop him. I didn't want him to hurt you." Mark was gone, having fled before the police arrived. But they found his fingerprints all over the cabin and evidence he'd been living there for weeks. Hannah had found him first, followed him here, and tried to confront him before he could reach me. When the ambulance drove her away, I sat on the porch of that cabin, watching the morning light break through the fog. For the first time since that phone call, I felt the air fill my lungs again. Hannah was alive. We were both alive. But one thing was certain. If she hadn't called me that night, if she hadn't whispered those 6 words, I never would have made it out alive. The morning after Hannah was rescued, the world felt strangely quiet. The chaos, the sirens, the fear, it had all stopped. What replaced it was a heavy silence that felt unfamiliar. I sat in a stiff hospital chair beside her bed, watching her breathe. Her face was pale and bruised, but peaceful. She was alive, and that was all that mattered. When her eyes fluttered open, she gave me the smallest smile, one that made my throat tighten. "I told you not to come home," she whispered weakly. I took her hand gently. "And I didn't," I said, my voice trembling. "You saved me, Hannah." Her fingers squeezed mine, faint but sure. "I couldn't let him hurt you, Rachel. I knew he'd try." She paused, her eyes glistening. "He blamed you for everything. For me leaving, for the restraining order, for the police showing up that night. He thought if he scared you, I'd come back." The words sank deep into me like cold water. I thought back to all those nights when I brushed off her fears, when she said she felt like someone was following her. She wasn't paranoid. She was being hunted. The police came later that afternoon to take Hannah's statement. Officer Reed stood by the door, his tone gentle but firm. He explained that Mark's truck had been found abandoned a few miles away, his wallet and phone still inside. They believed he'd fled into the woods on foot. "We'll find him," Reed said. "But you and your sister are safe now. That's what matters." Safe. It sounded simple, but it didn't feel true. Safety, I realized, wasn't just about locked doors or bright lights. It was about trust, and that had been shattered. For weeks after that night, I couldn't sleep without checking the windows twice, sometimes 3 times. Every creak, every sound of the wind against the building made my pulse quicken. But Hannah helped me heal, slowly, patiently, the same way she always had. When she was finally discharged, I moved her into my apartment despite her protests. "You're not staying alone, and neither am I," I told her. We turned the space into a little sanctuary, candles on the shelves, a dog from the shelter we named Toby sleeping by the couch. Some nights, we stayed up late drinking tea and watching movies, but sometimes we'd just talk about Mom, about growing up, about how close we'd come to losing each other. It was during one of those quiet nights that she said something I'll never forget. "You know what's strange?" she asked softly, staring out the window. "If I hadn't called you that night, I think I still would have gone to your apartment. I had this feeling, like something was pulling me there, like I didn't have a choice." I looked at her, and for a second, I saw that same fear flicker behind her eyes. "You didn't just save me," I said quietly. "You saved yourself too." We didn't talk much about Mark after that. The police never found him, though they searched the area for weeks. Eventually, the case went cold. At first, that terrified me, knowing he was still out there somewhere. But as time passed, fear gave way to something else, a kind of calm. I realized that even if he was free, we were too. He couldn't control our lives anymore. Months went by, and our lives started to feel normal again. I returned to work. Hannah went back to her nursing shifts part-time, and slowly, laughter returned to our home. I'd catch her singing in the kitchen or talking to Toby as she made breakfast, and every time I felt grateful just to hear her voice. Sometimes, I still think about that night, the phone call, the whisper, the silence that followed. It's burned into my memory like a scar, but not all scars are ugly. Some are reminders of survival, proof that even when the world turns dark, love can still find a way to shine through. One evening, about a year later, I was sitting on the balcony watching the sunset when Hannah joined me. She leaned against the railing, the light catching her hair in a soft glow. "You ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't called?" she asked. "All the time," I admitted. "But then I remind myself, you did call. You saved me." She smiled and nodded. "Guess we both got a second chance." We stood there in silence for a while, the sky turning orange and pink. In that quiet, I realized how much had changed, not just our circumstances, but us. Fear had taken something from us, yes, but it had also given us something unexpected, a deeper bond, a reminder of what really mattered. I decided to move out of that old apartment soon after. I wanted a place that didn't hold shadows of that night. Hannah helped me pack, teasing me about how much junk I had. We laughed through the exhaustion, and when we finally closed the door for the last time, I felt a strange peace settle over me. Before we left, I looked back one more time at the space that had once been my home. The same door that had creaked open in the dark now stood still. I thought about that girl, the one who stood frozen on the stairs, terrified, and I realized I wasn't her anymore. I was stronger now. We both were. Now, every time my phone rings late at night, I still get that brief jolt of fear. But then, I remember Hannah's voice on the other end of the line, not as a warning this time, but as a comfort. The sound of someone who would always be there, no matter what. As I tell this story today, I know one thing for certain. That call didn't just save my life. It changed it forever. It taught me that love and courage can exist even in the darkest hour, and that sometimes the person who saves you isn't a stranger or a hero, it's family. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And remember, When someone you love whispers for help, always listen. It might save a life.